Hello, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining this webinar. You can see it's still people joining, but let's kick off. It seems to be a very popular webinar. We have approximately 400 registrants for this webinar. You all are in listen mode, meaning your microphone are automatically muted this full webinar session. My name is Jonas Kramer and I am Cloud Solution Specialist at Autodesk. During this webinar, you can write questions. You can see in the questions area that you find in this GoToWebinar toolbox. We will probably not manage to respond in real time, but we will pick up questions from this questions area you put in, and I will ask those questions to the presenter during the Q&A session in the end of this webinar. Please, next slide. I hope everybody are well and safe during this crazy COVID-19 situation that we all are suffering from in one or another way. It's important for us Autodesk to support how you continue to do business during this situation. Therefore, we started an extended access program, the acronym EAP, meaning that we are letting all around the world use several of our cloud software free of charge during a certain period. This program has recently been extended to end of June. Here you can see a statement from our CEO, but also this is from our website. And how to reach this information, you can go into our website, go into the COVID-19 Resource Center, and to the top right you have the Extended Access Program, where you can find more information, where you can download software, but also take notice to go into the Q&A session so you understand how to set up it correctly and so on. And we have, for example, BIM 360 Design and the BIM 360 Docs supporting the AEC industry in the EAP program. And this seminar is about BIM 360 Design. Next slide. So we will have a couple of pulse questions here to kick off with. Let's start with the first one. So we want you to respond here. What is your company main business? Please select one. And we will give you a few seconds more. And I believe we can check the results.
Yeah, absolutely. So good morning, it's Yves Villard here. I'll do a proper introduction of myself in a couple of minutes. But people are still responding here, so I'm just going to give it 5 more seconds or so, and then I'm going to collect the responses, okay?
Thanks, Yves.
No worries. Okay, we've got 64% voting, and we're going to close it. So let's see what that is as a result.
Okay, interesting. So we have most are engineering firm, and then we have architect, construction, and then owner, investors. Very, very interesting. And thanks for that. Let's have another question.
Sure.
What is your role within your organization? How does it look, Yves?
Well, we're at 58%, 60% voting. Oh, moving up fast, 61, 62. I'll give you the results in a second. Okay, seems like we've got most people, so I'm going to close it down and let's have a look at the results.
Great. Okay, almost half of the audience are designer, and then we have manager, others, and executive. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Great. Let's take another one.
Yeah.
What are you using to collaborate on design projects when working remotely?
Oh, there are some interesting results here. I'll show them in a second. Again, we're gonna keep the voting open for just a second, but these are interesting results. You'll see in a second, Jonas.
Great.
Yeah, we're at 70%, so I'm gonna close it down again.
Great. See, we have several BIM 360 design users. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
but also,
so no more newbies.
yeah, but only 40% of that. So I probably should not say only, but it's room for improvement.
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
Nice. Let's have another one shortly.
Yeah.
Have you or somebody else in your company recently downloaded free trial licenses of BIM 360, the extended access program I recently talked about? Yes or no?
Again, I'll show the results in a couple of minutes, but Jonas, it's good you mentioned it. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I hope we don't have to wait several minutes.
No.
Couple of seconds,
No.
I probably.
Sure. Yeah, we're again, a lot of people have voted, so I'm going to shut it down. And let's share this.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Thanks
so
for
as
that.
I mentioned, good you mentioned it in the beginning of the presentation, absolutely.
Yeah, I believe we have a last poll questions, right?
Correct. That's the last one.
What is your level of experience with BIM 360 design?
Okay, 62% voted, 63, 64. All right, I'm going to close it down and let's show the results here. There we go.
Okay, interesting. It's a very broad mix here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great to see. Okay. I believe you can take next slide,
Sure.
Yeah. So I am happy to announce that we're going to have Polo Architect part of this webinar to talk about a little bit of their history and their experience. But I will let them introduce them by themselves, and I will now hand over to you, Yves, and you can introduce yourself a little bit more as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jonas. So good morning, everyone. So you've already heard me during the poll questions. My name is Yves Veelaert, Technical Sales AEC Northern Europe, working for Autodesk. I've been with the company for 13 years now. My main focus, I would say, is anything that has to do with data management and collaboration. So obviously the BIM 360 portfolio is part of that. And as Jonas mentioned, Polo Architects have kindly agreed to be part of this presentation. So I'm just briefly going to ask Floor and Rudy to present themselves. So let's start with Floor. So good morning, Floor.
Good morning, Yves. Good morning, everyone. My name is Floor Wetemans. I'm responsible for the marketing communication for Polo Architects. Yeah, I will show you in a few minutes. I will brief you and give you an overview of who we are and what we're doing and what kind of projects we're focusing on.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Rudy, could you just say a couple of words on your role and your function within Polo Architects?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Yves. I'm Rudy van Tienen, BIM manager at Polo Architects, Antwerp and Brussels. I'm working with BIM 360 design and docs since a few years, so some experience with it.
Excellent, excellent. Alrighty, we'll hear both Flor and Rudy later on during the presentation. I'm just gonna kick this off right now with, well, first of all, obviously an agenda. We've just had the intros and the polling questions, so I'm just gonna make sure, and so to be quite honest, looking at the polling questions, I was kind of expecting people to be in a varied range of where they are when it comes to collaborative software, specifically, obviously, today, BIM 360 design and work sharing and what have you. So I thought it would be a good idea before we introduce Polo architects with the cases they're working on to actually put everyone on the same sort of level and just start talking about Revit work sharing. Why this is important? Well, because the whole BIM 360 portfolio is, well, not the whole portfolio, but BIM 360 design certainly is based on that same philosophy. So we're going to talk about Revit work sharing. I'm going to briefly introduce the collaborative platform, which is BIM 360. Then we're going to move on to a specific role within the BIM 360 platform, which is BIM 360 design. And then we're going to hear at what Polo Architects has to say. So we're going to do a bit of an intro on Polo Architects, and then we're going to have some questions for them. Not to be confused with the Q&A at the end, so we'll try and keep a couple of minutes over or open at the end, where Jonas is checking during the whole presentation actually the questions that come in. If you do have questions, as Jonas mentioned, you have the question box from GoToWebinar. Feel free to ask myself or anyone from Polo Architects or indeed Jonas questions, and we'll do our best to answer at least a couple of them at the end. So that's the Q&A session. Right, so let's kick this off. So Revit work sharing, and I'm pretty sure that most of you will know this concept. Some of you might not, so I will be discussing this very briefly. It is a basic concept of Revit. It's been around within the software for, well, I guess 10 years or even more. And essentially, Revit is a tool. It's obviously a design tool, an AEC, architecture, engineering, construction design tool, but it's also one of the tools that allows us to design collaboratively. And it means we set up Revit in something sort of a client-server mode. So it essentially means that we're going to have a central model somewhere, and that somewhere is quite important later on when it comes to BIM 360 design. But we have in general a central model, and then we're going to have different users all working on that central model. They're actually having a local copy. And again, this is an introduction session, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the actual setup and what have you, but just think of it as, I'd like to think of this as sort of Outlook and Exchange. You all have your own email box, and there's an Exchange server, for instance, within the company. That's where you get your emails from. That's what you're sending them to. That's sort of the same concept, not entirely the same, but sort of the same concept between a local model and the central model. Okay, so everyone is gonna upload their changes into that central model. And so over the last 10 years, so as I explained, this work sharing concept has been around for quite some time, even from before we started introducing cloud technology. So essentially what we've done is we've deployed that same technology, that same powerful technology that people are used to for 10 years, and we've pushed this into the cloud now. So that's in a nutshell what we're doing with BIM 360 design. There's a lot more to it, and we're gonna show that later on, and we're gonna have a discussion with, as I said, Polo Architects, how they deploy this. But essentially that's still the same philosophy, okay? Which is the first step to making it easy for people to use it, because if you've heard of the work sharing concept in the past, work sets, save to central, reload latest, relinquishing objects, etc., well, basically that's the same in BIM 360 design. So there's a couple of more functionality in there, which is actually addressing what you see in this slide. So controlled teamwork sharing. So what you see from that previous slide is that there's many people, a lot of designers working on the same discipline, if you will. But what happens if we want to collaborate between different teams? And usually within the AEC industry, that's not the same company. You get an architectural company, you get a structural company, or maybe it is the same company, but then you have to collaborate with MEP, which is external, etc., etc. The point is there will be some teams that are external to someone's discipline, if you will. And so the question that we've tried to resolve and that we did resolve over the last years is this interaction between those different disciplines, if you will. So think of it as that work sharing concept is still very valid for the architectural team. The work sharing discipline is still very valid for the structural team. But how do we get this data across? So when I noticed in the poll question that you're using VPN and what have you to communicate designs, that's essentially out the window here with BIM 360 Design. And we're going to talk about how that works essentially. Now, the idea is that everything sits on BIM 360 Docs. So that's the platform, if you will. And it's sort of a horizontal component. We call it the common data platform. That's BIM 360 Docs. And on top of that, according to the phase that you're in or the discipline that you're working for, we have some very specific solutions which sit on top of this BIM 360 Docs. And I'd like to think BIM 360 Docs in a nutshell, and it's by no means it's doing it justice, but think of BIM 360 Docs as sort of Windows Explorer in the cloud. Again, there's a lot more to it, but as a concept, you store your data in the cloud. And what you then do is you communicate either in the design stages, or maybe you want to understand how clashing is working between the different disciplines, or maybe you want to control on the construction site health and safety, commissioning of machinery, etc., etc. So essentially, we have for those different phases, we have specific tools that sit on top of this BIM 360 Docs module, if you will. So one single source of truth, everything connected to it, which also means we can do analytics and understand where our project is going. But that's not the main topic for today. We're going to be focusing on this first aspect, which is BIM 360 Design. Okay, so BIM 360 Design, first component, this is sort of the entry into BIM 360 Design. Again, it's gonna take us too far, but right now we do have interfaces not just for Revit, but also for Civil 3D, for Plant 3D. That's happening in BIM 360 Design as well. If you're wondering what about AutoCAD, we do have tools for AutoCAD as well. Again, we're gonna be focusing specifically on Revit today and the BIM 360 Design module in there. So when we talk about BIM 360 Design, it's actually three components. So what I mentioned earlier, the work sharing concept, the interface between Revit and a central file, well, that central file now sits on the cloud. So essentially, we still have that interface within Revit. So again, learning curve is minimal. It's still the same, save to central, reload latest. I tend to say if an IT manager would in the background remove Revit server and put the central files on BIM 360 Docs and Design and give everyone a local copy in the weekend and Monday morning they start again, if they don't look at where they're saving to, they wouldn't know there's a change actually. So that's how easy this is to implement, if you will. So Revit Cloud Work Sharing, still the same philosophy for all of those architectural designers, structural designers, etc., etc. As I mentioned, central file sits on BIM 360 Docs, and BIM 360 Docs comes with something very specific, which is called, as I said, it's so much more than a Explorer in the cloud, if you will. It comes with a viewer. We call it the large model viewer. It essentially allows us to open a great many type of formats, not just Revit, but also IFC, also SketchUp files, also Rhino files, step format, SolidWorks, MicroStation, DGN, etc., etc. So there's a lot of file formats that we can view, which means that we can give access to owners and they can give feedback. So when it comes to outdated versions, well, this is near live. And again, I'm not going to explain here why it's near live, but it's certainly a lot more up to date than if you would use VPNs or send stuff by email or by PDFing out or etc. etc. This last module here is also a cloud-based module. So you'll see this one sits in Revit. These two are cloud-based. This is the actual BIM 360 Design module in the cloud. I'll give you a screenshot later on. This is the official handover project through what we call packages between the different disciplines. So as I mentioned, yes, the technology is still Revit work sharing, but there's a lot more to it to get to that official handover process between different disciplines. So very briefly, when we go into saving in Revit, this is sort of what happens in the background. For those of you who are already using BIM 360 Design, you might have seen that if you hit Save to Central within Revit, it's not necessarily updating the file in BIM 360 Docs. And the reason is that we have to explicitly specify as the designer that we want to publish the file. The only time that it happens automatically is the first time when we initiate collaboration. But after that, we simply hit save to central, or sync with central. And essentially it means that there's sort of a hidden file in the cloud, the central file, which does indeed get updates, which is only accessible to the Revit users that have access to it. But when those people say, right, this is our architectural design, this is what we want to hand over to the structural engineers, etc., that's when we're going to publish as, for instance, the architectural team, and we're going to get a new version on BIM 360 Docs. Okay, so very briefly, and then we're going to move on to Polo Architects. So how does this work between those different disciplines? So essentially what you see here is basically those green bulbs, they're just folders inside of BIM 360 Docs. And so this whole process that you see here, you'll see some arrows pass by, etc. This is fully automated through BIM 360 Design. So there's no copying, no nothing. This is BIM 360 Design in the background doing this stuff. So essentially, what you saw on the first page with the different users working with the central file, that's, let's say, the architectural team. And they're going to do their iterative design. And at some point in time, they're going to say, right, this is what we want to have reviewed by our BIM coordinator. So he's going to go into BIM 360 Docs. He's going to look at the published file. And when he's happy, so there is this step in between, the verification by the architectural BIM coordinator, he's then going to create a package. That package can contain anything, but it will certainly also contain the Revit files. And the beauty then is that it's not because the architect has committed something that structural engineers have to simply accept it. So they can actually, through their BIM coordinator, review this. If he's happy, they can consume it. They can use it as a background, so they can link it into their own design. They can do their own iterative design. And at some point in time, they're going to say, right, this needs reviewing by our BIM coordinator. He's going to review it, create a package, and then share it out. So there's actually, when it comes to BIM 360 Design, you saw this just earlier on, there's actually a step above this. This is for the BIM coordinator, and then they're going to start building those packages and sending them out to the rest. The beauty is this is fully traced and tracked in BIM 360 Design and BIM 360 Docs. So when people say, well, I never received that file from you, that's basically, again, out the window. This is a full audit trail that will show you, well, I handed this over to you at this point in time, and you actually accepted it. You accepted the package, and that's what we're using today. So that's sort of what's happening here. Last screenshot, and then we're going to move on to Polo Architects. So this is the BIM 360 Design module itself. And so what you'll see is those different teams. So when I was talking about architect and structural engineer, it's not limited to 2 disciplines, obviously. So what you'll see is that we have 5 disciplines here. And so could be the name of the discipline, could be the name of the company. That's entirely configurable for people to set up. And essentially what you'll see here are those packages across time. You can zoom in, zoom out, you can look at the details, you can actually click on it, look at it in detail in the well, what you see here, the large model viewer. And that's how we can actually get this process aligned between the different companies, different disciplines, and streamline information between the different companies. Okay, so that's my quick overview of BIM 360 Design, and there's a lot more to it, and you'll see some of this in the next webinars. We've got a couple of them posted up on our website later on. So I would encourage you to look at those follow-up webinars as well. We'll go in a little bit more detail. We'll actually get to touch the product itself, or I get to touch the product, and I'll show you how this works. But for now, let's hear from one of our customers who has deployed BIM 360 Design. So before I start asking questions as to how that process went, Flor, I'm just gonna ask you if you could just briefly give an overview as to what Polo Architects is doing. So Flor, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Yves. Good morning to all. In the next 10 minutes, I will give you a brief history of who we are, what we have done prior BIM, and thirdly, an overview of on what kind of projects we are currently working on. Polo Architects was founded in 1991 by Mauro Paponcino and Patrick Lotens. Initially, the office was named Paponcini and Lotens. Only in 2015, we changed the name into Polo Architects. Their career started with designing private residences. Just two examples to give you an impression. Zooming in on the one on the right side. This house was designed for a landscape architect. Here you see the concept sketch on the AutoCAD floor plan. The layout of this house was inspired by a chestnut burr cracked open on the ground and 3 volumes protect the nut within, an intimate salon made from wood. In this case, a concept sketch today would still be very similar to this one. However, the AutoCAD plan, of course, on the left side was just a linear drawing. Can I have the next slide? Okay. Well, nowadays, the majority of our projects are large-scale projects. A milestone within the journey towards larger capital projects was the competition for the new regional headquarters of Belgacom. It's a telecommunication company. It was a competition in 1994, and it was a project of 30,000 square meters. Polo Architects won the competition and got a lot of positive exposure from this project. The concept is still very relevant and also still an inspiration for us. By creating a kind of floating building, you see here the flexibility and the circulation within were lifted to a much higher level. In addition, it elevated the user experience by offering a beautiful perspective, and the employees looked out on the green surroundings and patios instead of a dual car park. Oh, yeah. So today, Polo Architects is a multidisciplinary office and is one of Belgium's leading architecture firms specializing in urban planning, architecture, and interior design. We are now with over 100 creative professionals with offices in Antwerp and Brussels. And over the years, we built up a national and international portfolio comprising competition-winning entries. Here you see some snapshots of our office life and 2 images of our office locations. On the left side, you see Tour Taxi in Brussels, where our Brussels office, of course, is located. And on the left side, at the waterfront, you see our office in Antwerp. We have a quite horizontal structure. We're working in teams, and with each team consisting of about 12 team members. So we have 5 architectural teams, an urbanism team, an interior team, and an ambitious competition and research cell called Labs. So our strength is our multidisciplinary approach. As a result, Polo Architects' assignments are very diverse in nature. Here you see some of our projects, including master planning, renovation, redevelopment, residential projects, education, offices, healthcare, commercial, culture, and leisure projects. In the next part of the presentation, I will firstly share some images and drawings of some of our key projects that are already completed. Secondly, I will show you some of the BIM projects we are currently working on. This is an image of the school campus, the Lucas School of Arts in Brussels. It was a construction and also a renovation. Here you see the school within the direct surroundings. And the challenge for us was related to the dense urban environment and the significant differences in the height. Polo Architects' design proposal was chosen because it was able to retain the school's charm and informal nature, no tabula rasa, no overlay, rational new structures. The design retained several of the most valuable buildings in courtyards, and others were demolished and 2 new buildings were added. Right. Yeah, here you see. Here you see the overview. Okay, and here you see some pictures of the building. Here you see a part of the skyline of Ghent with the Flemish administrative center in a very dense urban area. It is a project of 36,000 square meters. The two towers are dedicated to offices, and the lower part is more public for public utilities. It was built for the Flemish government. They wanted to house its civil servants in the Flemish administrative center and always in the immediate vicinity of major stations. So it's here close, it's near the main station of Ghent. The building is called Virginie Loblin Tower, near St. Peter Station, and it was the last largest center in the sequence they built. The construction of the tower kicked off on an ambitious urban regeneration project near the at a disused rail yard, and the project received a lot of recognition and awards. Okay, here you see a part of the Masterplan and Isometric view. Okay, here you see the entrance to the transfer hub for public transport integrated in the low rise. This is Artezis Plantijn University College. It's a school college of 33,000 square meters. The campus is situated on a very special place at the head of Park Spoor Noord in Antwerp. The school building marks the start of the Leyen Boulevard in Antwerp. It's a very busy road crossing the city from north to south. And this exceptional location required an iconic building. With the campus being situated on a very busy area, as said, Polo architects added as one of the gestures a public circulation. You see it on the left side. By creating a safe and enjoyable access way towards the city center and the entrance to Park Spoor Noord, besides access to the campus itself. Here you see some images with the one on the top left showing one of the circulation areas facing the central inner court and the cross section. This is Cadix project, also in Antwerp. It's a mixed-use project with more than 40,000 square meters, consisting of apartments, service flats, a healthcare center, and shops. It's on a spacious block in the Cadix neighborhood. It's a new urban development in Antwerp. In the right upper corner, you see behind the black high-rise building the school campus Artezis. Here you see. Here, yeah. Here you see the square-shaped site with the direct surroundings and isometric view, and also the concept view from the communal inner court and the cross sections. In 2018, we completed the Red Cross Care Hotel, Zuikerken. It's a circular building, and this was this year also nominated for the MIPIM Awards. It's situated in West Flanders, in the proximity of Bruges and the west coast of Belgium. The Red Cross Care Hotel is a holiday resort where people with serious illness can unwind. It's situated beside a large pond in a rugged natural landscape and offers 360-grade view. The inspiration for this project comes from the Chinese Tulum. It's a circular building, so you see here. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, you see here. Also, a recent completed project is the Diagonal Vessels student residence in Barcelona. It's a student housing. Polo architects created a university residence for students and professors in the center of the Forum district, district in full development. The winning competition design supports the role of the campus as a social center and meeting place. The new campus in Barcelona aims to become an innovation center where internationally recognized education, research, and technology transfer comes together. Here's some views and the cross section and view on the inner courts. This is Campus West. It's on the left bank side of Antwerp. It was completed beginning of this year. Polo architects realized in this short called Gesamtkunstwerk that underlines the multidisciplinary of the team. It's both the Masterplan, the architecture, and also the interior design are done by Polo architects. It's an office space that is all about co-working, co-creating, and the architecture draws its inspiration from large industrial spaces. So in the next slide, you will see the inner space. Here you see the remarkable roof. Oh, yeah, here you see the remarkable roof in woods. It's got its inspiration from origami. View from the inside, just after completion, prior to occupation. This is also a view from the inside. Okay, this is the last project I wanted to show. We're almost nearing the ending of my presentation. So all the previous projects were realized without using BIM 360. Only in 2015, 2016, Polo architects started working with BIM. And yeah, as Yves also mentioned, and Rudy will confirm, it's a very efficient way of working. It reduces, also the carbon footprint, and well, we have a good collaboration with all the parties. So in the following slides, I will present you the projects we're currently working on with BIM. So this is the project. I will go a little bit faster through these slides. This is a BIM model. This is also a project we're working currently on. And you see here also the BIM model. This is a school campus we're working on, and the BIM model. Another residential housing complex. This is Rabotsite in Ghent, a social housing complex. The project started several years ago, but for the last phase in this project, we work with BIM. You see it here on the right side. And then this is Elysia Park in Edegem. It's a residential development near Antwerp. It's approximately 40,000 square meters. Its project contains 390 residential units, from apartments to assisted living facilities. So the Elysia Park project is divided into 4 building clusters and is realized in phases, one after the other. Also, this project started several years ago. During the first 2 phases, the team did not use this collaboration platform, but for the last 2 phases, 3 and 4, we work with BIM on this project. So here you see the overview of the buildings, and this is the BIM model. Another view. Yes, this is a picture recently taken by our project architects while visiting the construction sites. And this is the last picture recently also taken during a visit during lockdown. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation.
Okay, thanks very much, Floor. That's really impressive as projects go. So let's zoom in on, if you will, on the usage of BIM 360 design. So I'm just gonna talk to or ask Rudy a couple of questions here. So I mean, we've seen a couple of projects here, and indeed it looked like a couple of those projects were started and finished prior to BIM 360 design. I think that Elysia Park was mentioned as the transfer to BIM 360 design. So before we dive into that, could you, Rudy, just briefly explain what were you using before BIM 360 design? What sort of looked your IT infrastructure like?
Well, it was most like the same as working with the BIM 360, but internally on the Revit on the server of Polo with work shared models, central files. So each model of each team could join the team of modeling just by saving, synchronizing. Yeah. The way of working within Revit was almost the same as today.
Excellent. Okay, so then my next question obviously is, so you were used to work sharing. So why was that then a problem? Why did you shift towards BIM 360 design? Because you, as you mentioned, and that's what I mentioned during my presentation, it's nice to have that same sort of workflow, but did you see any added benefits to using BIM 360 design compared to the traditional way of using central files?
The main difference was working with other disciplines to share the information, to share your model with the structural engineer, the client, the technical engineer. That was through WeTransfer or an FTP server. Right. But the moment you detach your model, it's outdated. So yeah. A week afterwards or 2 weeks afterwards, you download it, you upload it. The other party goes further on, is newer. So you are looking at an old model. And to avoid that, we choose from the beginning for BIM 360 design and BIM 360 docs, so we can work with also central files, but with the structural engineer included in the architectural phase. So
that's brilliant. Yeah,
much closer working together.
Yeah, and I think that's what we see from the people that I talk to. If you talk about BIM 360 design, and actually prior to BIM 360 design, how people work, it's indeed, and we saw that in the poll as well, right? It's like we're using VPN to put people on maybe Revit server or a central file or whatever. There's lots of tools out there that are being used to sort of try and ease the collaboration between different sites, but that's very hard actually. And I think a tool such as BIM 360 design is truly geared towards cloud collaboration. Okay, so you decided to move on to BIM 360 design. So how did that adoption go? Did you, for instance, I mean, this is looking brilliant, right, Elysia? BIM 360 design comes along. Is this like where you said, right, we're just gonna dump it onto this project and move on? Or tell me a little bit about how you deployed BIM 360 design.
The deployment went very easily because the licenses were bought by HeoIT in Antwerp to get them connected to the users. It was behind the scene. The modeler himself added any negative response. For him, the work within Revit was the same. Saved locally, synchronized, but for the rest, it was all behind the scenes. So for the workflow, it wasn't itself a big difference for the modeling, but it was behind the scenes, the coupling with the other disciplines, that was a big difference.
Yeah, and again, I think that's what we see, right? That's the #1 question that we had in the past on Revit server, for instance. Can you put security on Revit server so that other people can go in? But still, you have to like build a whole IT infrastructure, and that's basically out the window here with BIM 360, right? You have the entitlements, you hook up Revit to it, and you're good to go. And the beauty is you can actually use those older files, and that's what I want to stress with what Floor was mentioning. You can actually take an existing project such as the Elysia project, which is going on, and then just move it into BIM 360 design and move forward. Same workflow for the designers. There's absolutely no pain and no learning curve when it comes to that save to central, reload latest, etc.
It wasn't only the structural engineer or the technical engineer, but also the client be involved with the project online through BIM 360 docs, so you could make some issue management through the platform. It was all time saving from the beginning.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you're gonna send out, and that's what we hear a lot, like sending out PDFs, and then it's like, what version did we send? 2 weeks later, you want to update. Well, what sheets do we send out, etc., etc. And that's out the window with this publishing that I mentioned. Absolutely. So that's to your benefit. Excellent. The one thing I would also look into, because that's something you specified, right? You're collaborating now with the structural engineer, but it seems to me the way you say they're working in the same central model. So what I just presented with the two teams and creating packages and what have you, that's not happening just yet, I think, right?
No, normally we don't need it because we are working together as an architecture bureau and a structural engineer in one central file. So we don't need the packages. It's by synchronizing each day or each week, we see the improvement of the model. For the technical engineer, we work with linked models, and then we are going to use the packages. But that's not to the order right now.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I mean, I think the whole product, if you will, BIM 360 design, there's so much to it, yet very easy, but people have to start somewhere, right? And I think if you're used to, like, we're working with central files, save to central, reload latest, that's the first step, and that's what I would advise, right? It's what you're used to, that's what you can bring forward into BIM 360 design as well. But I do think that if you look at it, I tend to compare it with like a slide bar on, like, I don't know, a radio set or something. You can go from 0% to 100%. So you can stay with the old way of working at, if you will, 0% or 10%, save to central, reload latest, all of that, very good. But you can easily and safely and coordinated move that slide bar up to 100% of usage of BIM 360 design, and that's where the packages come in. That's where issue management comes in, etc., etc. So very good. Sorry.
That's why the issue management is being deployed. Also, the workflows for the improvement of the plans by the client, by the technical engineer, by all the parties.
Excellent. And that's the beauty, because workflows isn't necessarily part of BIM 360 design. It's part of the base product, which is BIM 360 docs. But the fact that it's all so integrated, BIM 360 design on top of docs, and even coordination on top of docs, and the whole build module on top of docs, it means that we're always talking about the same design, the same models, the same specifications, etc., etc. We can deploy the workflows indeed from the base product and apply it to Revit files that come from BIM 360 design, etc., etc. Okay, I have one last final question, and I think I know what you're going to answer, because you sort of mentioned it already. So what would the future hold for Polo architects when it comes to BIM 360 design? You mentioned, you know, the work sharing, that's fully deployed now. It's actually the same as before, only it's in the cloud now. Would you stick to this? I think you mentioned the MEP engineer will get involved, and that will be a linked file, and you will be using the packages?
Well, the policy within Polo is that we start every project in Revit in the BIM 360 docs environment with all the parties with Revit in one central file. So it's almost 100% sure we are going to use it further on in the next years. So it only can improve. Yeah.
And I think I want to stress that to the audience. So the fact that you've got this step between saving to central and actually publishing means that you have this verification step internal before you hand out something to your customer, for instance, so that he can review. But the fact that he's there and that he can view the design that you've published, if you will, in a coordinated way, means that the interaction between the different parties, but also obviously the customer, is a lot more close. There's other stuff, we'll talk about that in next webinars. You can do 3D comparison between versions. It's all versioned as well. So, but we'll talk about that in a later webinar. Okay, so I think it's now 10 to 11 Central European summertime. So I'm going to open it up to Floor as well. And Rudy, we're going to keep you online for a second. Jonas, if you can just unmute yourself. I think it's basically time for Q&A. So Jonas, have you followed up on the questions that came in? I did see the dialogue box pop up a couple of times. So.
For sure. It's a couple of questions. I've selected some of those. First of all, I got some information that we have some kind of poor quality in the sound. So
Okay.
sorry for that, but we're going to make sure that we're going to improve that for the next coming webinars. Some of the questions I can actually answer. One question is will those slides will be available after this webinar? And not the slides, but this session is recorded, and we will send out a follow-up email probably tomorrow to all attendees, and you can reach the recording there. And another question is also, where are the server based on the BIM 360 cloud? And and you can actually select when you purchase BIM 360 if you want to have it on an America server center or if you want to have it on the European server center. And good to know that also the BIM 360 design has recently only been available in American server, but now we have the BIM 360 design also on the European data center. So it's important that we all have. Probably a question to you here, Yves.
Okay.
Can you link IFC's files in docs? Question mark.
Yes, you can. It's through the desktop connector. Again, we can have a look at that in the next session. But yes, it's possible to link in IFC files into this BIM 360 design workflow. Yep.
Yeah.
The IFC file has to obviously, well, actually not necessarily, but I would highly suggest that the IFC file would stick to BIM 360 docs as well, because it's basically going to look at the cloud path then. So, and otherwise it's going to try and find the IFC in some local folder location, which probably not everyone has access to. So yes.
Ah, great, thanks. And there is I try to combine the two questions. There's one who's working with Rivet today, and some other one here is also a little bit misunderstanding the concept between BIM 360 design and Revit server, and I believe it's more about, let's say, the access rights. For sure, we're going to go through that a little bit more in the next coming webinars. Yes. But I believe that's one of the big beauty with BIM 360 design. Can you just elaborate a little bit about the difference between the Revit server and BIM 360 design when it comes to the access?
Absolutely. I'm not going to bring up the slide where it sort of was shown. So remember that BIM 360 designer was showing 3 components, one in Revit, 2 on the cloud. The middle one was docs, and then the slide or the part to the right was the BIM 360 design module itself. So what's the let's first start with what's common between Revit server and BIM 360 design. So think of that slide that I just showed you with, on the left-hand side, the Revit part. That's exactly the same as Revit server, with that difference, yes, there is a difference, obviously, that the central file with Revit server sits on a local server, a Microsoft server, sits somewhere on that drive on the operating system. Whereas in the case of BIM 360 design, the central file sits in the cloud. And that's where the commonality stops, because BIM 360 design is also about communication. So Revit server, yes, you can save to central. Yes, you can do reload latest. Yes, you can have 5 people, 10 people, 20 people on it. But if you then want to share this information with the building owner, for instance, well, you have to extract it somehow. Either you detach it from central, either you create PDFs or DWFs or whatever, you create an IFC, and that's what you send to your client, for instance, which immediately makes it outdated, as Rudy was mentioning, because design continues, right? So Revit server, the equivalent, again, in a nutshell, it doesn't do justice to BIM 360 design, I know, but that left component on my slide there is sort of similar to Revit server, but that's where the commonalities end. There's a lot more to BIM 360 design. When it comes to communication, I would say with non-Revit users, right? The customer probably doesn't have Revit, won't be using Revit, not well versed in Revit because he has never been trained on Revit. So with that large model viewer, he can look at the file that you as an architect, you as a structural engineer are designing, can send feedback immediately, and it just removes so much inconsistencies in communication between those different disciplines.
Great, it's popping up more questions here. I try to select here and also be aware of the time. And a question here is, when moving an existing project to BIM 360, is it possible to create central file with existing Revit files from the different design teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you do is you take even a client file that you already have, right? So you open a Revit, so the actual workflow, you open Revit, you open the client file on that machine, and you detach it from central. You keep the worksets, and you'll see that at that point in time, you can actually go into the collaboration tab, and you can save it to the cloud, if you will. So that file then becomes a central file with the worksets. Obviously, the worksets that were there before, the ones that were in use and the ones that were open, that's out the window, right? Because Revit server or whatever it was that it was running on would have that information. But the worksets themselves, the names, the objects that are in those worksets, they'll come over. But they're all open, if you will, those worksets. So you'll have to reassign them to the different users. But yes, it's definitely possible. And to be quite honest, I think that's how Polo architects moved from stage 1 and stage 2 on the Elysia project to stage 3 and 4 on BIM 360 design. They simply took their files and moved them on to BIM 360 design.
Thanks, Yves. Another question. I believe this is mentioned to Polo architect, to Rudy and Floor. The question is, have you had experience of using BIM 360 design to share models between different consultants companies, for example, MEP, structure, architecture?
I'm not quite understanding the question because.
So the question is, have you experienced to share with external users?
Yeah, so I think let me just elaborate a little bit. My view on this question is that Polo architects, as you mentioned, Rudy, they're working together with the structural engineer. I do believe the structural engineer is an external company, right? That's not you guys doing this. And I'll let you answer the rest of the question, but essentially the question here is, so you've been working with the structural engineer. Have you worked also with MEP engineers, for instance, or are you looking into that?
Yeah, for the Elysia Park project, we worked with an external discipline for MEP, also cloud-based in a work shared model, so we could link it to the central file of architecture and structural engineering. So there was a very close collaboration. So it's not the first project because all the other projects we are starting up is with all the parties in the cloud, linked or not linked.
Excellent.
Thanks. Okay, Yves, I believe you can go to the next slide. We need to close this webinar. Yeah. I just want to mention some stuff here. It's please do remember this was the first webinar of a series. So the next one we will have on June 11, and the third one will be June 25th. But we also want to get, let's say, information from you, what areas you want us to highlight for the next coming webinars. When you closing this webinar going out, actually we're going to pop up a survey, and please fulfill that survey so we know how we can improve those kind of webinars. I also would like to take the opportunity to thanks a lot to Polo Architect to be part of this webinar. Next webinar we're going to have another customer that's going to be co-hosting with Yves. So. Yeah. With that, I will say thanks, Yves, thanks, Polo Architect, and thanks all attendees joining this webinar. See you at June 11.
Yes, thank you very much, guys, and talk to you later. Cheers.